dreaming. And so they asked him, they were like, do you believe if you ever stop dreaming, like, you're basically dead? He was like, yeah, like if you stop dreaming and you stop believing in yourself, then that's it. And so they asked him, they were like, so Dame Dash asked, I think it was Steven Jackson. He's the darker.
He's the dark-skinned one, yep. Mm-hmm.
He asked him, he was like, what's your dream? So he was like, I want to be an actor. And he was like, that's such a low-tier dream.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of Between the Lines podcast. We have the wonderful, the amazing India Sage. Thank you so much for hopping on.
Thank you.
A mother, it's crazy because Mother's Day is this Sunday, so it's very ironic how I have my first parent, on the interview. But a mother, an entrepreneur, a brand strategist. India, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Super happy to have you.
I'm very happy to be here.
She's from Atlanta, but she took the time to actually come out, so I'm super.
Not from Atlanta.
Well, not from Atlanta, but she lives in Atlanta. There you go, correction. She lives in Atlanta, so you took the time out to come, so I truly appreciate that. I owe you one.
Yeah.
But more importantly, just go ahead and formally introduce yourself. Tell the audience a little bit about what you got going on.
Awesome.
Let them hear it.
Yeah, for sure. So hi everyone, I'm India Sage Williams. I'm the owner and founder of India Sage Media Agency, which is a strategic and creative brand communications agency that I started actually back in 2020. But I didn't end up really going full time as an entrepreneur until 2021, which was the time that I ended up finding out that I was expecting my son. And that's when I decided, okay, I need to pivot out of the career that I'm currently in. My background is primarily in broadcast journalism, and so from college, that's what most people remember. What I did was really in that field of media and mass communications. And although I'm in brand communications, it's still the same thing. It's just a different way of storytelling. But yeah, once the pandemic hit and there was so much uncertainty, and I found out that I was expecting, and I was like, okay, I don't really want to be out there in the field and kind of, not knowing if I'll get sick, what will happen to the baby. And I was like, this is the time for me to really take advantage of being an entrepreneur and really building out my business model to a way that works around my child, instead of the other way around.
Right.
And so for me, it was a no-brainer when I really sat there and thought about, like, in what ways can I use my current skill set and just utilize it to get me to my next level.
Right.
And so again, with my background being in creative storytelling and me having this analytical and strategic side and really have worked in the marketing and advertising field with other marketers and advertisers, I was like, okay, I need to bring together a culmination of all of these things and really go forward with my agency. I started out working alongside of a UI UX web designer by the name of Amira Mead. She owns the Fempire firm, and we started off together, and so we would work together with strategy and web design, and it completely took off because we realized there were so many entrepreneurs that needed that, and that's really how I got into what I'm doing now.
Wow, that's so dope, because I know for me personally, I remember you, we went to school together, right, Delaware State University, and I always remember seeing you doing your little, your broadcast journalism stuff,
around
doing
campus,
interviews around campus. And just kind of hearing your voice, it was so powerful. So to kind of see how you kind of transitioned into the field that you're in now is kind of dope. But you said something that kind of stuck out to me, and it was kind of the pivoting factor, right? And what was that like, knowing you was expecting your first child, and knowing that you wanted to obviously transition and do something different that was more feasible for you. So what was that thought process like? Like, what was the original thought behind, okay, wow, I have to actually switch this up. I gotta make this pivot.
Yeah, no, it wasn't an easy decision, I'll say that, right? And so, like I said, my career started off in broadcast journalism. When I graduated, I moved to New York. I lived there for a while. I worked at CBS News. That was great. New York was crazy. I was like, I gotta get out of here.
I love New York, but I'd be having to get out of here too.
It's too much going on. So I'm like, I don't think this is for me. And it's crazy because when I was in college, I was like, this is for me. No.
Wow.
I ended up getting another job at CBS Philly, and so I worked there for a while, and then I got a call from Delaware, and the city council government, they have a television station there called WITN 22, Community News, and they were looking for a broadcast journalist, and they asked me if I was interested in the job, and they laid out the offer, and I thought that it was a good offer at the time,
Right.
you know, being, you know, obviously fresh out of college, you know, had a couple jobs, but it was just a better pay grade. And I was like, okay, you know, this might be great. So I ended up transitioning. And though I loved the career field and I enjoyed being in it, there was parts of it that just were not 100% fulfilling for me, right? And so over time, I think you really start to realize when you are perfecting your craft and really honing into your niche and what is it that you do great, right? Like what is it that you do best outside of the title and outside of the industry? You know, innately, what are your skill sets that you do best and what is it that you want to share with the world? I didn't feel like I was giving my all in that capacity. You understand? And so, you know, life happens, right? And no, I, you know, for those that may be wondering, I was not expecting my child, right? But great, you know, if he has completely changed my life. My son's name's Lotus. He's completely changed my life. Amazing. And I'm so happy for him.
Little Lotus.
How old is little Lotus? He's 10 months.
10 months. Awesome.
Yeah. But, you know, like I said, you know, when that came up, I was just like, okay, I am ready to take a risk, even though I'm scared. And so I made a calculated risk into this decision. I think a lot of people, when they're trying to look at whether or not they want to be an entrepreneur, some people just dive headfirst in and they quit their job and they have no savings and that's it, right? And so for me, I had been at the company for a little while, and so they actually ended up paying me out in order for me, you know, to kind of have like some kind of like backing while I was I was still already working with clients. I had started working with clients prior to me making the final decision to leave.
To leave the job, got it.
And simultaneously, I made the decision to also leave and go to Atlanta. So it was a lot of life changes. Yeah. It was a baby coming. It was me moving to Atlanta. It was a new career. It was entrepreneurship. But I knew that this was a part of my calling. And if I didn't make this decision now, I don't know when there would be another chance.
I love it.
And so that's really what helped to fuel the pivot. Because it was like, India, yes, you love storytelling in the way that you started, but there's so much more that you could be doing and lives you could be changing. And that's what I've discovered through what I'm doing now. It's much deeper than building a brand for someone. What I find is that people come to me with ideas that they've had for a lifetime, right? And have no idea how to, you know, make it happen. Or they've made it happen. They've grown this business for 10, you know, 15 years. And now they're like, what's the next step? You know, how do we keep things refreshed and how do we revitalize the brand? And that's where I love to come in and really help to, you know, nurture and rebrand that.
I love it. No, I love it, man. I love it. Just the whole pivoting factor. You know, you kind of talking about taking risk and all of these things. It kind of make me think about, you know, some of the risk I had to take as well. You know, even when it comes to, you know, entrepreneurship and podcasting and so many other things, you know, this was kind of a risk for me as well. You know what I mean?
And I'm so proud of you.
I appreciate you so much. It means a lot. So when you say the risk factor, I can relate to that, you know, 1,000%. And I think a lot more people do need to understand that sometimes you do got to go out on a limb and really take that risk, because you'll be so surprised on what come out on the other end of it. You know what I mean? So for you to kind of do that, kudos to you. And before we kind of dive into, you know, what you got going on right now as a brand strategist, I do kind of want to really dissect the whole broadcast journalism thing. You know what I mean? So can you talk a little bit about what broadcast journalism is, but more importantly, how did you even get into that? Like, what made you fall in love with storytelling?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how did you kind of get into that?
Yeah, so broadcast journalism is an extension of mass communications, which some people are familiar with. If you've ever been to a HBCU or Delaware State University, you heard of it. People make the jokes, oh, that's the easiest major in the world.
I do hear that. I do hear that. And I understand that y'all have y'all own.
It's not, right? Sure. So there's you know, I think that especially for those that are in that field, they understand it's a different type of grit that you have to have, right? Because everybody wants to be on TV. Everybody wants to be in the limelight. So what is it that's gonna separate you and set you apart and make you different, right? And if you don't have that, you're not gonna make it. That's number one. Number two, let's say you have all the talent in the world. Like, you're really great at what you do, but you don't have grit, you don't have tenacity, you don't have hustle. You don't have a reason why you're doing this, you're not gonna make it, right? And then outside of that, there's just an art and a craft to communicating, you know, and to really be able to get people to commit to an action, right? To do something, to tune in, to engage, to give you their attention. You have to really be skilled in that. And so it's not easy. It's something that you may have innately, but you still have to nurture.
Understood.
And so I got into this field through obviously Dell State, right? And so when I came to Dell State, I thought that I wanted to be in criminal justice. I tell this story all the time. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and maybe like in the future I'll still do things in the justice department in terms of, because I really do want to help people in that way, but I don't think that was like the direct path that I needed to take. And so I came in thinking I was going to be, you know, a criminal justice major, and everything was great and I was doing well. I was having some other personal things that I was going through simultaneously that I look back now and I think that those were really just life-altering moments that needed to happen in order for me to become who I am today. But at the time, obviously, you don't realize that. But anyways, I didn't know criminal justice was, I thought criminal justice was the end-all, be-all. I ended up meeting a friend in college. Her name is Jacqueline Washington. You guys are probably familiar with her.
I think she's dark skin.
No, she's brown, light skin, and she was in the mass comm field, and she freshman year had her first internship at NASA, and we connected because our stories are pretty similar in terms of the things that we've been through, and we connected instantly. And so she would be around me a lot and really get to know me as an individual in terms of what I like to do, like poetry and things like that. And she's like, India, you're a really good writer. You need to look into mass comm. And I was like, mass comm? I don't know about that. There's no one in my family that's on TV. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and so, long story short, Jacqueline introduced me to mass comm. I ended up taking a tour of the mass comm department, and I fell in love with the TV station, because everybody has a path, right? Whether you're going to do radio, or you're going to do PR, or you're going to do television, and I took a natural liking toward the television. And my first, I guess, entryway into the major, I think it was actually prior to me even switching, before I switched my major, I had already wrote my first treatment for a television show and pitched it to the TV station.
If you don't mind, you mind talking about what that show was about?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the name now. I don't even remember the name of it, but it was, I think it was like a talk show or something like that. And yeah, actually it was a talk show, and I actually ended up having Jamila. It was called All In. I believe it was called All In. And I actually ended up having Jamila host that, Jamila Mustafa. So shout out to her. She's doing amazing things at BT, and I think now she's at VH1.
MTV, oh yeah.
MTV, I'm sorry, one of those. I'm sorry, Jamila, you do so much.
One of those, yeah.
But yeah, so we worked together on that project. But yeah, before I even entered way into the major, I had already wrote my first treatment, and I knew that I was great at it once the director was like, oh yeah, like this is dope. You need to make the switch. And I remember going to my guidance counselor and telling him like, hey, like I want to change my major. And he was like, why? Like, you're not gonna, like, nobody gets a job, you know, in that field. Why would you do that? You're in criminal justice, you're doing well, look at your grades, stay here. And I was just like, okay, let me think about it. And I ended up making the final decision. I changed it, and it was the best decision that I made. And I've experienced so many amazing moments in my career that I would have never got the opportunity to if I would have really settled in on someone else's fear for my life. And I think that's the biggest thing for people, is that you have to really stay in tune with who you are, because the world will try to tell you who you are, right? And that goes back to what I do, is encouraging people to lead forward with their own story and share who you are. What is your brand? What do you represent? What is it that you want to communicate to the people that need you? And so, you know, the depth of that goes back even to the beginning of my story and how I got here. And so, yeah, so I made the switch, and I loved it. I ended up, you know, once Jamila graduated, she was the Around Campus host. And at the time, Around Campus was like a really prestigious, you know, role, because it wasn't just anybody in that host seat, right? It was really someone who could really carry conversation, who really could, you know, bring to the student body what the information that they needed to know about whatever. And so I took pride in that, and I loved that. And I had the opportunity to intern my junior year for CBS News DC. And so I went to DC and I did the internship there, and I made amazing connections, and I had my heart set on working for them once I graduated. I wanted to work in DC, but then when I went to NABJ, that summer, I ended up running into the vice president of CBS News in New York. And he was like, "You're a star." He was like, "I don't know what it is about you."
How did that feel? I know that feels
It was crazy. I was like, okay. He was like, "I don't know what it is," but he was like, "Something about you, you're going to be great." Right? And I was like, okay, well, I need a job. Not, in so many words, but like, he's like, "What do you want to do?" And at the time I was so, and I think back to it now, I was so insecure in my talent that I would hide behind what I really wanted to do. And though I wanted to be on TV, because I was listening to what other people said, "Oh, everybody can't do it," I was like, "Oh, I just want to be a producer."
Wow.
Which I'm producing now, right?
Wow.
It all ends up working
all makes
out.
sense.
But at the time, it was like, India, you want to be on camera. Why are you not saying this? Why are you not leading with that? Right?
Wow.
And so I was like, I just, I really have a thing for producing. I want to produce. And I was good at it. I could produce a show, right? Or I could produce content, or so I thought, right, at the time.
So I thought. Right.
If I look back at that stuff now, I'm like, this is terrible. But then I was like, this is great stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
So I ended up meeting him anyways, and really nurturing that relationship. And he was like, "Hey, there's an opening, you can apply for it." I ended up applying for it, had to go through several series of interviews and pitching myself, and then I ended up landing the gig. And so that was my introduction to that. But in terms of the marketing and advertising industry, it's really funny because now that I think about it, when I was in college, I was helping people with their campaigns. I was helping people with their campaigns for different leadership positions and things of that nature, right? So I was on, certain campaign teams, and really the strategy behind some of them, like Jocelyn.
I love Jocelyn.
Yeah,
she's gonna be on the show too. So
yeah,
I know Jocelyn, she might watch this.
Shout out to Joss. Yes,
she's been ducking my calls, man. It's so cool.
Yeah, I worked on her campaign, Sean's campaign. There was a few campaigns that I worked on, and so I always had a natural liking for being able to strategize, right, around a goal and whatever that goal is. And so it's funny that now, one of the things that I do within my business is I create marketing campaigns, right? And so that, if a company is trying to launch a new product, or they're trying to rebrand, or, introduce a new service, we build a campaign around it to help them better tell the narrative behind what they're trying to essentially accomplish, right? So anyways, yes, that's how I got into that field.
Dope. No, that's dope. And I kind of, before we even talk about anything else, I do want to talk a little bit about...
I just want you to know that.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, do your thing. I just kind of want to talk a little bit about, just the whole, the fear thing and the, listening to other people. I think that is very dope, because it's so ironic that when we do get that affirmation from other people, it's like we don't even believe it most of the time. You know what I mean? It's like we have so much of the skill, we have so much of the talent, but it's like we don't really know it for ourselves until we hear from somebody else. You know what I mean? And I really always wanted to figure out why that was. I relate to that very much because, for us, you know what I mean? We're so skilled, we're so talented at so many things, but we don't necessarily see it with our own two eyes. It always has to take another set to kind of make us realize that. And I know for you, because me even looking at you, right? I agree with that person, the person that worked for CBS, was it CBS or CBS? CBS, 1,000%, because I was looking at you on campus and I'm like, wow, she's so talented, she's so gifted, you know what I mean? But it's like, for you to not be able to notice that until somebody gave you that confidence and that reassurance, I know that kind of sparked you up to another level. So what did that kind of do for your, I don't want to say ego, but what did that do for your pride, right? Did it make you feel good? Like, I know kind of getting that from others, it make one feel good, because I know for me, if somebody tells me something about, how talented I am, how skilled I am, like you're saying you're proud of me or whatever the case may be, it just makes me feel good. So what did that do for you at that specific point in time? You know what I mean?
I will say this, I think that number one is very important. And you grow into these things, like you grow into your confidence and you grow into your ability to say I'm great at something, and it's not about being cocky. It's just you've learned yourself in ways that other people don't know you. Like if your back is against the wall, you're the only person that knows how you're gonna get your back off the wall, right? And so you have to be confident in that. And like I said, it doesn't happen overnight, because some of us, especially those that are talented, like if you ever met a singer, right? Oftentimes, if somebody can sing, they don't like singing.
Right.
You're always like, man, if I could sing, I'd be out here singing it up, right? But it's because we often struggle with something called imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome makes you feel like you don't deserve to be in a room. You're not enough. You could be doing better, or downplaying what you actually are great at. And so working through that is actually really important. I suggest any entrepreneur, business owner, or individual get a therapist, because everybody needs therapy. And that's what I realized, right? You don't even have to go through, super traumatic experiences in life, but it could be something as simple as that, as imposter syndrome, that could be holding you back in your business, in your life, in your marriage, and whatever. And so, I struggled with that throughout college because of so many things that I've been through in my life, growing up, and the things that I encountered. And when I did get to college, I was very depressed. I was still trying to figure myself out. I had a lot going on internally, right? But I always had this just natural grit and tenacity for more, and that was what was kept pushing me and kept driving me. Obviously, of course, my support system, and shout out to everybody who has ever been a person of support in my ear. But when Kurt Davis, the vice president, when he reached out to me, when he met me and he gave me that, he's a great guy. When he gave me that affirmation, it really did put a fire under my butt. You know what I mean? Not only because I wanted to have, whatever opportunity that, he could have provided, but I wanted to not only I not only wanted to do a good job, but I wanted to make him proud, right? And when I ended up, actually getting the opportunity and deciding to leave later on, I felt like I failed him. And I didn't talk to him for some time. And he would reach out to me and say, India, why aren't you reaching out to me? This is the imposter syndrome again, right? My path is taking me where it's supposed to take me. I was not supposed to stay in New York. I was not supposed to stay at CBS News. I was not supposed to be in that, right? I was supposed to be where I'm here now, and wherever else I'm headed. And so I didn't accept that at the time. So I was like, I don't want to talk to him. So he's like, India, you're doing great. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? Okay, so what? You tried it, you didn't like it, you moved on. But for me, it was I've let everyone down. And you don't let anyone down so long as you continue to just never stop.
Right.
It's when you stop that it's oh man, you just gave up on yourself. You know what I mean? And for him to see so much in me, in the space and time that I was in, I was just man, I just want to make everybody proud. And I think that, looking back today, I think that I am. Yes, in a nutshell, that did give me the boost of confidence that I needed to walk into the next room. But I feel like you're always having to revitalize that confidence factor.
Right.
If you are someone, especially if you're someone that's dealt with any type of trauma in your life, because it'll always resurface in different ways, especially if you're not really taking it head on to heal. And that was my biggest thing. Mental health is very important for me. And I wrote a book called 100 Better Days, Daily Quotes to Improve Your Mindset. And I released that back in, I think that was 2019. Yeah, it was somewhere around there, right? And I released that book because my mom was actually my mom who adopted me. I'm adopted. She was actually one of my first interactions with the word affirmation and what that actually meant, right? And for me, affirmations really help to refocus my thoughts when they do start to go into that more negative affirmation side where it's like, oh, you're not good enough. Oh, people are better than you. Oh, you don't belong in this room, right? Positive affirmations help to turn those around. And what I learned was that you cannot just utilize affirmations that are generic. I mean, you can if you want, but I think that people that don't feel like it is effective utilize ones that are so generic. You have to create your own affirmations, right? And you have to think about what is it that inspires you and would inspire you every day when you wake up in the morning, right? And so what are the things that you tell yourself? The first thing that you tell yourself when you wake up in the morning is gonna stick with you throughout that day. So if you wake up and you stub your toe, now you're rushing, now it's traffic, oh, I'm gonna have a bad day. Of course you're gonna have a bad day. You've affirmed that. You've told us that's gonna happen and now it is.
Talk about
It's the same concept with anything in life, right? And if you tell yourself you'll be successful enough, you're gonna start looking toward the actions, right, that you need to take in order to become successful, right? If I say that I deserve to be in this room, then I need to find out what is going to make me the sharpest tool in this box to be in this room, to not feel inferior to anyone because I'm not even worried about you because I'm too busy sharpening my own pencil.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Wow.
So it's like, that's the type of, that is the type of development, personal development that one has to invest in order to really get past imposter syndrome and really start believing in themselves. And so that, my journey to that has been very long, but I've been more intentional about it as a woman today than I ever have.
I love it. And I definitely agree with the whole, just the whole affirmation thing. One thing I like to say about the affirmations though is affirmations truly don't work unless, you do the work. You know what I mean?
Unless you do the work, yeah. And that's an affirmation in itself.
And one thing I notice about you is, despite all of the, hardships that you may have had, growing up or whatever the case may be, just based off of what I know from you, you seem as if like, you put that work in obviously to get to where you are. So how do you develop that action behind the speaking? Because there's many people who feel as though just because you're saying affirmations, yes, say positive things. I'm happy and grateful that I'm this. I'm happy and grateful that I'm that. But there's also people who like to say affirmations, but they don't do it. The work. You know what I mean? So how important is that? And more importantly, how do you kind of develop the action to kind of, spearhead the affirmation that you're speaking, Yeah,
I'll give a little story that just happened recently, right? So recently, I'm a part of Forbes The Culture and Forbes Women.
That's amazing. Shout out to you. That's dope.
And I got invited to the Forbes Under 30 conference in Botswana in Africa.
Amazing.
And when I originally received the invitation, I got it and I was like, there's no way I can go to Africa. This is impossible, right? Like, this is crazy. I can't do this right now. I have my son. I have this going on. I have that going on. I'm also not a U.S. citizen. I was born in Ghana at a refugee camp. And so I applied for my citizenship and I'm, in the process of that and that'll come. But in order to be able to travel internationally, you either have to have a travel document or you have to have a passport. And I didn't have one. So I'm like, all of this is, it just seems so far-fetched for me. So when I first received the invitation, I kind of sent it just to my close friends and family and was like, oh, this would be nice. I wish I could go. And everybody was like, yeah, that'd be great. Da, da, da. And so I kind of let it go. And I was dealing with so much stuff in this month of business. It was just the craziest stuff was happening, right? With clients and work. And I'm like, what is going on? And so I was kind of a little bit consumed by that. And fast forward to April, there was a point in time when I ended up stumbling across this interview of Dame Dash, and he was getting interviewed by, there was these two basketball players, Matt Barnes and...
who he does it with? We're talking about All the Smoke.
Yes.
Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson,
yes.
I think. Yeah.
And so they were interviewing him, and anyways, the clip was about dreaming. And so they asked him, they were like, do you believe if you ever stop dreaming, you're basically dead? He was like, yeah, if you stop dreaming and you stop believing in yourself, then that's it. And so they asked him, they were like, so Dame Dash asked I think it was Steven Jackson. He's the darker.
He's the dark skin one, yep. Mm-hmm.
He asked him, he was like, what's your dream? So he was like, I want to be an actor. And he was like, that's such a low tier dream. Like, you know, Dame Dash is so like, you know, whatever. So he's like, that's like whatever, like you could do that. You're a basketball player.
Right.
If you wanted to be an actor, you could do that. He's like, no, it's so much work, it's so much more to it. So Dame was like, okay, what's all the work that goes into it? He's like, you know, the classes and this and that. He's like, listen, you got 6 cameras in front of you right now, a cameraman and a platform. You could start acting right now. He was like, no, you can't. It's more than that, Dame. It's more than that. He's like, I'll show you how simple it is. So he gets up, just like we're sitting here right now, gets up, goes behind the camera, and he's like, I want you guys to set a scene. You're both interested in the same girl. You like the girl, and you found out that he's dealing with the girl, and you're upset about it. Action. And they start acting, right? So listen, I love this story. I love telling this story because it's so crazy to me. So they're like, he's like, action. So they act. He does really good. Like, you really believable, right? Yeah. And then he's like, scene. He's like, that's it. It's that simple. So the guy's like, dang, like that was some BS. And he was like, it's only BS because you said it was BS. He was like, that was good. He was like, you're the only person that said there was a BS. He said, okay. He was like, man, but acting is more than that. He said, okay, well, what's the highest version of your dream? What would that look like? And he was like, to be in movie theater. So Dame was like, okay, well, shoot 60 more minutes of that.
Wow.
So he was like, Dame, you're not understanding. He was like, no, what you're not understanding is that, in so many words, I'm like paraphrasing, right? But he's like, what you're not understanding is that when I asked you what the highest version of your dream was, you told me it was to be in a movie theater. But now you've reduced that dream to being nearly impossible just because you're saying that this wasn't good enough. So really, the only thing that's stopping you is you. Wow. And so back to your question of you asking me, like, what does it really take to start putting action behind the words or the belief or what you want to do is really getting out of your own way. And it's so funny because
I loved how you just kind of tied all of that. That was dope.
Yeah, and so for me, going back to the story of, you know, me being invited to Forbes and all of that, so after I seen that interview, something just told me to like scroll through my phone or whatever, and I started scrolling through my phone and I seen the screenshot from the invitation, and I was like, what's stopping me? Wow. I said, is it me? Wow. And if it is me, then what is it that I believe that is impossible about this? And I laid it out. I said, okay, what would it take to do this, right? Wow. I said, okay, I would have to clearly find, you know, to make sure that my son has an arrangement, right? Because I am a single woman, I'm not a single mother. He has a father, but we're co-parents, right? Okay, so I would have to figure that out. My passport and these different things. I said, okay, well, who do I know? I was like, well, I gotta figure out someone that's as close to Joe Biden as possible because the president of the United States is gonna have to approve an expedited travel pass for me, or it would be impossible because I was like 3 weeks away. This was like 2.5 weeks away from the conference. So it was like, at this point, it would need to be a miracle. I'm like, who do I know that knows the president? I worked in politics. I know people.
You do at this point?
So I know people that are close to Biden, closer than I thought, right? And so I'm like, you know, I said, you know, if there were some names or whatever, I will put it out there. But I was like, oh, let me, you know, contact so and so because maybe they'll be able to reach out. And then I thought of another woman who I interviewed back in my journalism days, and she was the founder of this organization called Every Man Counts. And she was from Africa, and she travels frequently. So I just reached out to her just to ask her questions like, what would it even look like for me to be able to do this? These are the questions you have to start asking. So let's say, for instance, you want to be a basketball player. You want to go to the NFL. You want to go to the NBA. You want to be a doctor. You want to be a dentist. You want to be a photographer. You want to be a podcaster. The first question toward moving towards your dream is, what would it take?
Wow.
What does it take? Those questions unlock so much because the whole time, like the guy who was saying, oh, it's so impossible, you're holding on to that, he's an NBA star. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many black, I'm sure, directors that see that interview, and if he believed in himself and really wanted to do it, they'd be like, Ryan Coogler could have been like, hey, get in the next, you know, thing, even if you're just an extra. That's how things start, right? And so just asking the right questions, and I just asked her, I'm like, what would that look like? And she told me, you know, what that would look like, and I told her, you know, what my limitations were. And she was like, oh, I know the ambassador of this country in Africa. Let me reach out to them and see what... I mean, that story's crazy, and that's for another podcast and another day. Yeah. But long story short, guess who got their passport?
You did. Shout out to you. Talk nice. I love it.
And so the moral of that story is to say, like, if I would have allowed myself to believe that what I thought I wanted was impossible, I would have never took the action to make it happen.
Wow.
It took that podcast for me to see that, to affirm to me that I am deserving of an opportunity that I desire. Because oftentimes what we desire desires us back, right? And if you are in true alignment with what is for you, then nothing can stop you.
Wow.
That's what that saying, what is for you will always be for you. Like, that's what that really means, because it's like, it's like a magnet. You know, like a magnet is going to attract because the ions have to.
Yep.
It's in alignment with each other. It's not going to stick to plastic. It can only stick to another magnet. And so when you think about that in terms of the things that are destined for you and aligned with you, if it's not, a lot of stuff is going to go awry. And sometimes even on the journey where it is for you, things will happen just to test how bad you want it.
Wow.
And that's what happened to me. Don't think that story of me getting my passport was like easy sailing. It didn't happen like that. I had to invest in myself throughout that journey, right? I flew to DC in the middle of the week, you know what I mean, the next day, because they were like, you got to come down, like, to the Capitol and pick it up. And I was like, okay, you know what I mean? So there's things on the journey that test you, because if I would have been like, oh no, I'm not, flying, getting a next day flight to DC, you know what I mean, in the midst of whatever else I had going on, I would have never had the opportunity. So sometimes you get tested along the way, but if something's absolutely not for you, then you'll just never get there.
Right. Wow, that's super dope. We're gonna wrap this up very shortly. Just trying to wrap all of this in. It's so amazing. I love it though, because you're speaking to the people. Like, you're really speaking to the people, and I know whoever's listening or watching is gonna be able to take this. So one thing I want to tap into, and then we're gonna wrap this up, but I do want to pivot back to your actual business now, as a branding strategist. And why is it so important for entrepreneurs or just people in general to have that strategy to market and highlight, their businesses? So why is that important in terms of what you got going on? Yeah,
let me start by saying that I believe now more than ever, people are realizing that as an individual, you are a brand. Before, we always looked at companies as, and their brands and kind of seen it only from that perspective, not as an individual person and or if I'm a business owner, I need to build a brand, right? Most people just understand that objective of what it means to run a business, which is to make money. That's the sole objective of a business. To make money, right? And that's why you create a business plan, because you're developing a plan that shows the money that you put into this is what you're gonna get out of it. But outside of having a business and a business plan, you have to have some type of human connection to the audience that you're serving if you're trying to create some type of loyalty around the brand, or you want to expand the brand, you want to create more brand awareness, increase engagement, or what so have you. And so you can't do that only under the objective of a business, right? Because a business, again, is only to make money. So the brand part is what is the other side of that objective, which is to make a connection with your audience, right? To tell your story, to get them to commit to an action. And so the reason why I really love this industry and being able to help people with their branding is because it goes back to, like I said, the foundation of what I do and why I do it, which is to empower other people to tell their stories, right? And so, when you think about your brand, like, you really want to think about the ways in which you want to impact people's lives. Now, let's say you have a business that's just a quick flip. It doesn't matter, right? Or certain businesses, it may not, having a human connection may not matter, right? But in terms of service-based providers or even product-based providers, right? Having that human connection is so important because it really makes or breaks how far the brand can go. Every brand eventually reaches its ceiling. Every brand eventually reaches a point where it's just like, okay, we have our, customers or clients that, support, but we want new leads. We want new interests. And how do you do that? You got to start, cultivating a strategy around telling whatever this storyline is. And so that's where I come in, right? And so the strategic and creative communications agency, we come right in, and the first thing we do is, excuse me, the first thing, these wings are really good, but
Thanks.
The first thing we do is assess your brand, right? So we have to understand, where are you at? Because every business is different. As far as my niche, I typically like to create plans and strategies for people that it may be their first year in business, but the ones that I manage, you have to have at least 5-10 years in business in order for me to manage you, right? Because those are two different levels and two different perspectives you're coming in, and so
you say
the work is different.
So to manage, you do at least 5 to 10 years in business.
Yes.
And what was the other one?
Or I could create a brand plan and strategy for you, and you may just be, going into your first year, or you're just in your first year. Just starting, right? So you may be a startup, and I don't mind creating strategies and plans for startups. But like I said, the main thing is assessing where you are. And once we have an understanding of where you are, because I don't work alone, I do work with other people. Once we have an understanding of where you are, it really helps us to be able to create a plan that's based around not only what we believe that's best for the brand and where the brand needs to go, but your ideas. Like I said, some people have sat on ideas that they've had forever, and that they've wanted to do or wanted to integrate into their business, but just didn't know how to do it. And so your strategy allows you to be able to see that, 6 months to a year in advance. I always tell people, plan by the quarter, right? And so if you know that, November is coming up, Thanksgiving's coming up, then you should have been shooting your marketing campaign in quarter 1, quarter 2 for that, right? Because now it's already done, it's ready, it's prepared, or at least you have the strategy and the plan to know what is that going to look like. Because let's say, for instance, in November, it's also your anniversary of your business, right? So you want to be able to tie those things in, but if you forget to do that, then you didn't get any content surrounded around that, right? Or let's say, for instance, you're trying to nurture your audience about a new product that's getting ready to be released. Well, you can't just lay it on them, right? And that's oftentimes what people do, because everybody thinks they're Beyonce. We're not Beyonce, right? We can't just drop stuff. Right? We can't just drop stuff and expect people to go crazy. Some people can, right? And that's great. But if you really want to sustain that growth and you really want to be able to measure that growth, you have to have a strategy, because a strategy allows you to go back and see, what do we do? How are you going to replicate all these people buying again? Right? How do you retarget them? How do you retarget people that are like them? Right? You have to know this data, because this data is going to help you really take your business where you're trying to take it. And so for me, I realized that that's what, especially, the Black community, right? Or African American business owners, I think that's what they struggle with the most, because most of us, and I'm not saying all, because some people are born into money, or some people are, they have business owners in their families and things like that. But for the most part, most people don't know a lot about business and branding and, all of this, you know what I mean? And what does it take and all of these things. And so we don't think this stuff is important. Right? We don't think branding is important. We think that's an extra expense. It doesn't make any sense. But when you realize, your branding is the difference between you making, 5, 10, 15, 20, 100K a month, because it's possible.
It's possible, for sure. Ooh.
And I know people, and I've done it, right? So when you know that there's things that are possible, right? I've made more money in my business than I made in my 9 to 5 when I was working as a broadcast journalist.
Wow. Talk to him.
In less months.
Talk to him.
You understand what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that to be cocky, or I'm saying that I'm rich and I'm a millionaire. I'm not that yet. I'm working on it. I ain't there yet. But what I'm saying is, I realized that there is, with strategy, there is really a way for you to center your offer in front of an audience that wants to invest in that. And that's what branding is all about. It's about putting your offer, putting your story, putting your service, putting your product in front of the audience that needs and desires that and wants that. And then again, just being able to, I'm trying to put it in words that make sense to everybody else, but being able to measure that data in a way that allows you to replicate it again.
Wow.
And so when people think about branding, though, the first thing that they think about is just the surface level things, the exterior. So there's exterior branding and then there's interior branding, right? External and internal. External is what everybody else sees, right? So external could look like your website, your social media, your events, your interviews, and a bunch of different things, right? Those are external things. Internal branding, which is the reason why the first thing we do when a brand comes to us is we analyze and assess where you are, because oftentimes what's stopping you from making the money that you want to make, or what's stopping you from connecting with the audience you want to connect with, doesn't have anything to do with the external things. Other external things could be logo and colors and all of these things, right? It may not be the external. It may be things that's going on internally, right? So is there miscommunication amongst your team members? Are you trying to do everything and that's why you don't have enough time to be able to do that? Like, what is it that's really holding the brand back?
Wow.
Right? Are you not responding to your customers, as fast as you can? Are you not getting enough feedback from them as you can? Right? Are you doing your market research before you go ahead and you release a new service, product, or whatever, or are you just dropping it?
Wow.
All of these things go into really understanding why a brand is not making the impact that they want to make. And that's what I like to do.
Wow, I love it. And while you're saying all of that, I just have one last question about this. And if you could just sum it up in the most easiest way possible to your understanding. So is there a difference between branding and marketing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the primary difference between branding and marketing is branding more so focuses on, like I said, more so like the reputation of the brand.
Got it.
Right? Marketing is more so, how do we make money from this?
Got it. So pretty much branding is more so your identity.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
And marketing is really more so how can we go out there.
How do we utilize the identity to make money? Right? So if you just think about a marketing campaign, right? You're taking the brand's, again, whatever, if you have a service, a product, a story, you're taking that and you're developing this storyline around it to get people to commit to an action.
There you go.
That's it.
There we go. I just wanted to.
And people always think like social media is marketing. Social media is not marketing. Social media is promotions.
Got it.
Right? Social media is promotions. Advertisement is a part of marketing.
Got it.
Paid advertisement is what you do when you run an ad.
Got it.
Right? And so there's so
many different.
Yeah, it's a bit of, different definitions that one really needs to learn and know, and probably wouldn't if they're not like super in the field and interested in that. But it really does help for you to at least look into these things as a business owner and entrepreneur, because you need to know if the person you're talking to knows what they're talking about. A lot of people say that they market. A lot of people say that they're brand strategists. But when you really start digging in, you're like, you're not a brand strategist. You might be a creative director,
You're about to wrap up. You're about to get up.
Okay. You might be a creative director, and that's one thing, but that doesn't make you a brand strategist.
Right.
And just the difference between the names and the definitions and what you actually do is really important.
Right. Man, earful. Last question. I do know that Mother's Day is approaching. It's this weekend.
Yeah.
It's this weekend. So happy early Mother's Day.
Thank you.
And just the last question, just on a personal note, how has motherhood, impacted you? In what way has it helped you become a better woman? From all different aspects, right? What has motherhood, if you could just sum it up very briefly, truly done for you?
I think that it's just made me sharper and wiser. Truly, I think that before, I believe that I had an idea of what it is that I saw for the future. And now it's like, I could see it clear as day. And I never understood that when people talked about the power of visualization and being able to really see what you want before it appears, you have to visualize it. And if you can't, then you'll never be able to obtain it. If I never knew what this cup of water looks like, how could I ever obtain it, right? Because I don't know what it looks like. I don't know even nothing about it, right? And so for me, having a child, it did something to my intuition, I believe. And intuition is very key and important to your journey as an entrepreneur, right? You rely on that a lot if you really think about it, because every decision you make, it comes from the gut.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you have to, in business, you have to really decide, like, this might be a good decision and this might be a good decision, but what's the better decision? And you're leaning on your intuition to do that. And I believe, having a child, it helped to really strengthen that, right? Because innately, these are things that you have to tap into, once your baby's here, right? Because you have to have the intuition to care for a baby, especially if you're a new mom. Shout out to all the new moms. I was a new mom, and you don't know nothing about
motherhood.
Not in that way. Like, oh, I take care of my nieces and this. No, I'm talking about, like, this is all on you. And you have to tap into your intuition and to really care for this child. And it does come second nature, but I think that it really sharpens. And I think for me, that's what it did for me. And it just made me, I think, a little softer too.
There she goes.
I'm so sappy. I love my baby. He's so amazing. It just made me realize that I'm fighting for so much more.
I love it. Wow, I love it. Getting a little emotional over here, but India, I appreciate it. I mean, you came in, you gave them what they needed to hear. So shout out to you for being a guest on the podcast. So look, if you enjoyed the episode, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for more episodes to come. I'm gonna drop all of India's information so you can stay connected with her on Instagram, Facebook, whatever the case may have you. All of the details will be in tel below. But India, I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. This was great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Peace out. Okay.